Hello, wonderful listeners. Welcome back to a story that's more than just words. It's a mirror reflecting the biases we often don't even realize we carry. Today we delve into a narrative that reminds us that sometimes the most profound wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the quiet dignity of a person dismissed, and the seismic shift that follows when true power decides to reveal itself. Imagine, if you will, the sun-drenched, vibrant streets of Miami, Florida. A city synonymous with glamour, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of the finer things in life. And nestled within its glittering facade, on a particularly exclusive avenue, stood the Prestige Motor Group. This wasn't just a dealership, it was a cathedral of automotive artistry. Polished marble floors gleamed under strategically placed spotlights, reflecting the sleek, sculpted lines of automotive masterpieces. Ferraris, Bentleys, Porsches, and the crown jewel, a brand new Rolls-Royce Spectre, its electric hum a silent promise of unparalleled luxury. The air itself seemed to hum with the quiet reverence afforded to wealth, carrying the faint, intoxicating scent of rich leather and the crisp, clean scent of newly printed money. Into this hushed, almost sacred space stepped Alani Davis. She was 19, with eyes that held a depth far beyond her years, a quiet intelligence that often went unnoticed by those focused on surface impressions. Today, she wasn't adorned in designer labels or sparkling jewelry. She wore simple, yet meticulously clean dark jeans, a crisp white button-down shirt, and comfortable worn sneakers. Her hair, styled in neat braids, framed a face that was both youthful and serene. She looked like any other bright, unassuming college student taking a break from her studies. And in a setting like the Prestige, that was precisely the problem. Alani moved through the showroom with a quiet grace, her gaze lingering on the Rolls-Royce Spectre. This wasn't a whimsical window shopping trip. This magnificent vehicle was her father's dream car, his 50th birthday rapidly approaching, and Alani, always one to meticulously plan and execute, was here to gather every last detail. She wasn't just admiring, she was assessing, imagining her father's smile. She approached the Spectre, her fingers gently tracing the cool, smooth metal of its door handle, a genuine appreciation in her touch. Suddenly, a voice, smooth as polished chrome but edged with a barely concealed condescension, cut through the quiet. "Excuse me, young lady." It was Chad Sterling, the dealership's reigning star sales manager. He was the embodiment of the prestige, perfectly coiffed hair, a practiced, almost predatory smile that promised exclusivity to those he deemed worthy. He assessed Alani from head to toe, his eyes lingering on her comfortable attire, a visible flicker of disdain crossing his features. "I believe you've wandered into the wrong place," he sneered, his tone dripping with false politeness. "These cars," he gestured grandly around the showroom, "are for customers who actually have the means, not for casual browsers." A few other employees, catching Chad's eye, chuckled softly. Nearby customers, sipping complimentary espresso, turned their heads, curiosity laced with judgment. Alani felt a flush creep up her cheeks, not of shame, but of a quiet indignation. This wasn't new. She'd experienced it in high-end boutiques, exclusive restaurants, even prestigious university halls. It was the silent, insidious language of superficiality, spoken fluently by those who believed wealth was a uniform. "Actually, sir," Alani began, her voice calm and steady, "I'm interested in the Spectre, the all-electric model. Could you tell me about the bespoke options, perhaps the Starlight headliner, and the current lead time for a custom order?" she asked, with the precision of someone who had done her homework, her gaze unwavering. Chad's practiced smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. This wasn't the usual intimidated retreat. "Look, kid," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "We get a lot of dreamers in here. It's a beautiful car, I agree. But perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at something in a more realistic price range? We have some excellent pre-owned luxury sedans over there." He gestured vaguely towards a less prominent section of the showroom. "Or maybe just enjoy the free air conditioning." He then deliberately turned his back, catching the eye of a loud, boisterous couple who had just entered, dripping with designer labels and jingling with keys to what looked like a brand new Porsche. "Mr. and Mrs. Dubois, welcome back. Your new Carrera just arrived." Chad's voice boomed with genuine enthusiasm, a stark contrast to the clipped, dismissive tone he had used with Alani. He ushered them towards a glass-enclosed office, leaving Alani standing by the magnificent Rolls-Royce Spectre, utterly invisible. It was a cold, sardonic smile Alani observed on Chad's face as he glanced back at her, a silent message. "You don't belong here." Her cheeks burned hot, but a quiet resolve settled deep within her. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She didn't even sigh dramatically. Instead, she took a slow, deep breath, maintaining her dignity. Her gaze, however, sharpened, lingering on Chad Sterling for a moment longer than necessary. Then, she delivered a calm, almost chillingly soft line, a whisper against the hum of luxury. "Understood, Mr. Sterling. I believe you'll regret this oversight." Without another word, Alani turned and walked out of the Prestige Motor Group, her head held high, leaving behind the gleaming cars and the sneering faces. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because sometimes the people who are most easily dismissed are the ones who carry the most weight, and the silence she left behind was far more potent than any argument she could have made. How many times in our own lives have we faced that dismissive glance, that quick judgment based solely on what someone thinks they see? Whether it's our clothes, our background, our age, or even the color of our skin, the sting of being underestimated is universal. But for some, like Alani, it's not just a sting. It's a constant, insidious hum of prejudice that can diminish spirits if not met with an unshakable sense of self-worth. It's a bitter truth that in a world obsessed with appearances, the true value of a person, their potential, their very humanity, can be tragically overlooked. But what happens when that oversight isn't just a minor mistake, but a monumental miscalculation? What happens when the seemingly insignificant bystander holds the keys to a kingdom? You're about to find out. The Miami sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a starkly beautiful contrast to the harsh grey light Alani had just left. She drove home, not in anger, but with a quiet, simmering frustration. Her mind, usually a whirlwind of innovative ideas and problem-solving, was focused on the injustice she had just endured. It wasn't the first time, of course, but it was perhaps the most blatant. A home, a sprawling, understated estate nestled amidst lush greenery in the Florida Keys, felt like a sanctuary. It was a place where luxury whispered rather than shouted. No ostentatious displays, just impeccable craftsmanship, art that spoke to the soul, and a profound sense of peace. This was the domain of her father, Elias Vance. Elias wasn't a man who sought the spotlight. In the tech world, he was known as the ghost of Silicon Valley, a visionary billionaire who had built Vance Innovations from a garage startup into a global powerhouse, influencing everything from AI to sustainable energy. Yet, despite his immense wealth and influence, Elias was profoundly, almost stubbornly, humble. He drove a modest car for daily errands, preferred quiet evenings with his family to lavish parties, and dressed simply. He had instilled in Alani the unwavering belief that true value resided not in what you owned, but in who you were, how you treated others, and the impact you made on the world. Alani found her father in his study, a room filled with books and the quiet hum of innovation. She recounted the incident at the Prestige Motor Group with a slight tremor in her voice, not from fear, but from the raw indignity of it. She described Chad Sterling's sneering smile, the dismissive wave of his hand, and the blatant favoritism shown to others. "He looked at me, Dad," she finished, her gaze meeting his, "and he just saw nothing. Or worse, he saw less." Elias listened, his expression unwavering, his posture calm. He didn't interrupt, didn't rage. But Alani knew her father. She saw the subtle tightening around his jaw, the almost imperceptible clenching of his hands. It wasn't anger she saw, but a deep, controlled disappointment. Disappointment in the prejudice, disappointment in the lack of empathy, and a quiet, steely resolve to address it. He simply nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you for telling me, Pumpkin. You handled yourself with grace, as always. Remember, Alani, their judgment is a reflection of their own limitations, not yours. True character reveals itself in adversity." He didn't reveal his plan, but Alani knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that something would happen. The very next morning, under the bright, almost blinding Miami sun, A vehicle unlike any other in the Prestige Motor Group's gleaming lot pulled up directly in front of the grand entrance. It wasn't a Rolls-Royce, nor a Ferrari. It was a custom-built Tesla Cybertruck, its angular, almost futuristic design a subtle yet powerful nod to Elias Vance's roots in innovative technology. It hummed silently, a stark, almost rebellious statement against the overt flashiness of the surrounding luxury vehicles. To the casual observer, it was just a peculiar-looking truck. To those who truly understood the world of ultra-high net-worth individuals and the pioneers of Silicon Valley, it was an immediate, unmistakable signature of Elias Vance. Elias stepped out, dressed in a simple, well-fitting polo shirt and khakis attire that again, like Elani's, was purposefully understated. He walked into the Prestige with the same quiet confidence his daughter had shown the day before, and just like Elani, he was initially ignored. Chad Sterling, sharp-suited and radiating self-importance, was holding court near a gleaming Bentley, captivating a potential client with his practiced charm. He barely spared a glance for the man in the Cybertruck, his internal filter immediately dismissing him as not the clientele. Elias didn't raise his voice or make a scene. He simply waited for a moment of quiet, then approached the main reception desk. "Could I speak with the owner, Mr. Richard Mason, please?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. A young, polite sales associate, Maya Sharma, looked up, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Maya had witnessed Alani's dismissal the previous day and felt a quiet unease about it. "One moment, sir," she said, quickly disappearing into an office. Richard Mason, the owner of the Prestige, emerged, a man whose smile was as polished as his car's, but whose eyes held a perpetual calculation. He greeted Elias with a polite but somewhat superficial, "Welcome to the Prestige, how can I help you?" He recognized the Vance name, not from any direct interaction, but from hushed whispers in elite circles. Enough to know this wasn't just any walk-in. "Good morning, Mr. Mason," Elias began, his voice even. "I'm here regarding an incident yesterday involving my daughter, Alani Davis. She was here to inquire about a Rolls-Royce Spectre." At the mention of the girl and Rolls-Royce Spectre, Chad Sterling, who had just finished with his client, sauntered over, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, the girl who couldn't afford a used sedan? We dealt with her, Mr. Mason, just a waste of time, really. Too young, too casual." He chuckled, glancing at Elias, clearly expecting agreement. Elias Vance, however, didn't break eye contact with Chad. With a slow, deliberate movement, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. He handed it to Chad. "Perhaps, Mr. Sterling, you'd like to re-evaluate who you believe is too casual." Chad took the card, his smirk widening as he read the name, Elias Vance. He was about to make another dismissive comment, perhaps "never heard of you," when his eyes dropped to the second line, CEO, Vance Innovations. The color drained from Chad Sterling's face as if someone had just pulled the plug on his entire circulatory system. The card, suddenly heavy, seemed to scald his fingertips. The name, Vance Innovations, echoed in the polished silence of the showroom like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a tech company. It was a global behemoth, a titan of industry, a name whispered with reverence in boardrooms around the world. Elias Vance didn't just have money, he was money, and influence, and power beyond most people's wildest comprehension. But that, Richard Mason, the owner, who had also seen the card, gasped, a tiny, almost imperceptible sound of horror. His polished facade cracked, revealing genuine panic. He had heard the legends of Elias Vance, the man who could move markets with a single phone call, whose philanthropic endeavors shaped entire communities. Before either of them could stammer an apology, a clear, steady voice cut through the stunned silence. It was Maya Sharma, the young sales associate from the reception desk. "Excuse me, Mr. Vance, Mr. Mason," she said, stepping forward with quiet courage. "I was here yesterday. What Mr. Sterling said to Miss Davis, it was unprovoked and deeply unprofessional. He implied she couldn't afford the car, made derogatory remarks about her appearance, and openly mocked her." Her voice was soft but firm, leaving no room for doubt. Chad Sterling's carefully constructed world crumbled around him. He wasn't just a sales manager. He was now a man who had publicly, unequivocally, and arrogantly insulted the daughter of Elias Vance. The Rolls-Royce Spectre Alani had inquired about suddenly seemed like a child's toy compared to the colossal mistake he had just made. This was no ordinary customer complaint. This was a reckoning. And as the realization settled in, chilling and absolute, Chad and Richard knew that their perfect, polished world was about to be rocked to its very foundations. The unassuming girl in simple clothes had simply been a reflection of her father's profound belief that true worth lies beneath the surface, and that judging a book by its cover can lead to the most catastrophic of misjudgments. The stage was set, not for a simple apology, but for a lesson neither of them would ever forget. The silence in the Prestige Motor Group showroom was no longer hushed and reverent. It was thick, suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic pounding of two men's hearts. Chad Sterling, the once arrogant sales manager, stood frozen, the business card for Vance Innovations feeling like a brand of fire in his trembling hand. His perfectly coiffed hair suddenly seemed disheveled, his expensive suit too tight. Next to him, Richard Mason, the owner, was visibly sweating, his polished smile having completely vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer terror. He knew the name Elias Vance not just from vague whispers, but from the financial news channels, from the whispers of ultra-wealthy circles. An affront to the Vance family could devastate his entire empire. Richard, recovering slightly, scrambled to find his voice, though it emerged as a choked whisper. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Vance, I am so profoundly sorry. This is an absolutely unacceptable and inexcusable. Mr. Sterling, you're fired immediately. Get out of my dealership." He gestured wildly towards Chad, desperate to distance himself from the impending catastrophe. But Elias Vance simply raised a hand, a calm, almost imperceptible gesture that instantly commanded silence. His voice, still maddeningly calm amidst their rising panic, cut through the tension. "Firing him now, Mr. Mason, would be far too easy. It would be a convenient way to sweep an inconvenient truth under the rug. It wouldn't teach Mr. Sterling anything, and more importantly, it certainly wouldn't fix the systemic problem your dealership seems to have." Chad, still reeling, opened his mouth to protest, to offer some pathetic excuse, but Elias's gaze, sharp and unwavering, pinned him in place. "This isn't just about one incident, gentlemen. It's about a culture that allows a young woman, or anyone for that matter, to be dismissed and humiliated based on their appearance, their perceived wealth, or the color of their skin. It's a cancer that erodes trust and dignity." Richard Mason swallowed hard, his eyes wide. What do you propose, Mr. Vance?" he stammered, his usual confidence completely shattered. Elias leaned forward slightly, his tone remaining firm, non-negotiable. "My daughter did not come here for a Rolls-Royce. She came to buy me a Rolls-Royce as a gift for my 50th birthday. She walked in here with good intentions and was met with contempt. Now, for the first time in your careers, you will listen to my terms. And these are not requests, gentlemen. And these are not requests, gentle." He laid out his ultimatum, not with anger, but with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to shaping worlds. "Firstly, Mr. Sterling," Elias's eyes fixed on Chad, "you will issue a formal public apology to Alani, not a press release, not a corporate statement, but a personal, recorded apology that acknowledges your discriminatory behavior, not just your unprofessionalism. You will explain what you did and why it was wrong. This will be for my family's private records, but it must be sincere and unreserved." Chad's face contorted, a mixture of disbelief and utter humiliation. A public apology? To a kid he had dismissed. The thought was anathema to his arrogant ego. Elias continued, ignoring Chad's internal struggle. "The Prestige Motor Group will immediately implement mandatory diversity, equity and inclusion DEI training for all employees, from the janitorial staff to the top sales managers. This isn't a check-the-box exercise. It will be conducted by consultants I personally recommend and will fund, experts who will challenge unconscious biases, promote respectful customer service, and foster a truly inclusive environment. This training will be ongoing, not a one-off." Richard Mason nodded weakly, already calculating the exorbitant cost but knowing he had no choice. The reputation of the Prestige was on the line, and Elias Vance had the power to make or break it. And thirdly, and this is the most crucial part, Elias's voice lowered slightly, becoming even more potent. "Mr. Chadwick Sterling, and you, Mr. Richard Mason, as the owner ultimately responsible for the culture you cultivate, you will both volunteer for 2 full weeks at the Lantern House Foundation." A stunned silence followed. Chad let out a scoff, a sound of utter incredulity. Richard looked utterly baffled. "The Lantern House," Richard repeated, as if the words tasted foreign on his tongue. What is that?" Elias allowed a faint, knowing smile to touch his lips. "The Lantern House, gentlemen, is one of Vance Innovation's core philanthropic initiatives. It's a sanctuary for displaced families, a place where formerly incarcerated individuals are given a second chance at reintegration, and a nurturing environment for at-risk youth in one of Miami's most historically underserved neighborhoods. It is not a place for casual browsers or polished suits. You will be involved in basic, hands-on tasks, cleaning overflowing toilets, serving meals in the community kitchen, organizing donations, mentoring children, assisting with job applications for individuals who have lost everything." Chad's face hardened with defiance. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm a sales manager, not a social worker. This is ridiculous. You can't force me to do that." "Oh, but I assure you, Mr. Sterling, I can." Elias's voice remained calm, but it held the unshakable weight of absolute authority. "This isn't about punishment, gentlemen. It's about perspective. It's about understanding the true value of human dignity, regardless of circumstance or appearance. You need to see the world through different eyes. You need to understand what it's like to be truly vulnerable, truly humble. This is the only path forward if you wish to salvage any reputation, personal or professional, and avoid further, far more significant consequences. Do you understand?" Elias's subtle hint at further consequences hung heavy in the air. Richard Mason, thinking of lawsuits, boycotts, and a social media storm unleashed by a global tech titan, knew he was trapped. He looked at Chad, then back at Elias, a desperate plea in his eyes. He slowly, reluctantly nodded. "Understood, Mr. Vance. We will comply." Chad Sterling, however, stood defiant, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with a mixture of resentment and impotent rage. He might have been physically present, but his spirit was clearly rebelling against this forced, correctional journey. He felt humiliated, trapped, and utterly bewildered. He had built his life on surface appearances, on the tangible markers of success. Now he was being stripped of those very things and thrown into a world he despised, a world that he believed held no value. This wasn't just about an apology for insulting a rich man's daughter. This was about Elias Vance holding up a mirror, forcing them to confront their deepest biases. It was about showing that true justice isn't always about revenge, but about fostering understanding and, if possible, transformation. It's about fixing the broken engine, not just replacing a faulty spark plug. And the engine of their prejudice was about to be put through a very rigorous and very dirty overhaul. The ultimate lesson, it seemed, was about to begin. The ultimatum had been delivered, the terms set. Chad Sterling and Richard Mason, 2 men who had spent their lives navigating the gilded cages of luxury, were about to embark on a journey that would strip them bare of their preconceived notions and force them to confront a reality far removed from their accustomed comfort. Their destination: the Lantern House Foundation. Chad arrived on the first morning, looking utterly out of place. He wore a crisp, expensive shirt, perfectly pressed trousers, and highly polished loafers, attire more suited for a golf course than a community center. He clutched his designer briefcase, as if it contained some magical shield against the gritty reality that lay beyond the polished glass doors of the Prestige. Richard, though slightly more subdued, was equally uncomfortable, constantly adjusting his tie and casting nervous glances around. The Lantern House itself was a vibrant cacophony of life, struggle, and resilience. It wasn't sparkling marble and hushed tones. It was the scent of freshly cooked meals, the chatter of children, the murmur of conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. The walls, though not opulent, were adorned with colorful children's drawings and hopeful messages. This was a place where people found refuge, regained their footing, and rebuilt their lives. And overseeing it all was Ms. Evelyn Evie Price, the director. Evie was a woman built of steel and compassion, with eyes that saw right through pretense. She greeted Chad and Richard with a firm handshake and an unyielding gaze. "Welcome, gentlemen," she said, her voice warm but unwavering. "Here, titles don't matter, only hands that are willing to help, and hearts that are open to learn." His first tasks were a rude awakening. Chad, who was used to delegating everything, found himself wrestling with industrial-size mops, scrubbing stains from the kitchen floor, and, to his utter horror, cleaning overflowing toilets. He muttered under his breath, grimaced at every speck of dirt, and constantly checked his pristine watch, as if willing the time to speed up. He tried to shirk duties, offering to supervise or consult, but Evie, with a quiet authority, would simply hand him a broom and say, "Everyone sweeps here, Mr. Sterling, and everyone learns." Richard, though less outwardly defiant, struggled equally. His hands, accustomed to signing contracts and gripping steering wheels, felt awkward as he tried to organize donations, sorting through piles of used clothing and toys. He winced at the strong scent of disinfectant and felt a profound sense of discomfort being so close to poverty. He tried to make polite conversation with some of the residents, but his words felt hollow, his smiles forced. The turning point for Chad began not with a grand revelation, but with a small, observant boy named Miles. Miles was 9 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a spirit that radiated unyielding optimism, despite having lost his home and all his possessions in a sudden, devastating eviction just months prior. Miles was often seen sketching in a worn notebook, his imagination a vibrant escape from the harshness of his reality. One afternoon, Chad was begrudgingly assigned to help in the children's study area. He was supposed to supervise homework, a task he found incredibly irritating. Miles approached him, holding up a drawing. It was a simple sketch of a small house with a garden and a swing set. "This is my dream house," Miles said, his voice soft but clear. "It's not very big, but it has a window where my mum can grow flowers, and a strong door, so we always feel safe." Chad looked at the drawing, then at Miles, who was looking up at him with such earnest hope. He suddenly felt a prickle of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Discomfort that wasn't about his own inconvenience, but about the profound simplicity of this child's dream. Chad, who lived in a sprawling mansion and scoffed at anything less than perfection, realized the vast chasm between his world and Miles'. Later that day, Chad was overseeing playtime. Miles, usually boisterous, was sitting quietly, holding a well-worn, faded teddy bear. "What's wrong, kid?" Chad asked, the question surprising even himself. Miles looked up. "My bear's ear is coming off," he whispered, a tear welling in his eye. "My grandma gave him to me. It's the only thing I have left from her." Something in Chad snapped. This wasn't a potential client. This was a child, vulnerable and hurting. Without thinking, Chad took the bear. His fingers, usually adept at manipulating expensive car keys, were surprisingly nimble as he found a needle and thread in the donation bin. Awkwardly, slowly, he began to sew the ear back on. It wasn't perfect, but it was sturdy. Miles watched, his eyes wide with wonder, then gratitude. When Chad handed the bear back, Miles hugged it tightly, a beaming smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, Mr. Chad," he said, his voice brimming with genuine emotion. "You fixed him." In that moment, a fundamental shift occurred within Chad. It wasn't a lightning bolt, but a quiet unfolding. He saw the pure, unadulterated joy that came from a simple act of kindness. A joy far more profound than any commission check he had ever received. He realized that the worthless child in front of him possessed a richness of spirit that his superficial world entirely lacked. The grime on his hands, the sweat on his brow, suddenly felt like badges of honor, not humiliation. He began to look at the other residents not as the poor or the less fortunate, but as individuals with stories, struggles, and an unbreakable human spirit. Richard Mason, observing Chad's gradual transformation, found himself subtly affected too. He saw Chad, the epitome of arrogance, actually laughing with children, genuinely engaging with the formerly incarcerated men about their job prospects, listening intently to the stories of the displaced families. Richard, who had always believed in transactional relationships, began to see the quiet dignity in selfless service. One afternoon, he found himself helping an elderly woman fill out complicated medical forms, patiently explaining each section. The woman's tearful gratitude struck him deeply. touching a chord he hadn't realized was there. The 2 weeks at the Lantern House weren't just a punishment. They were a crucible, a place where the raw, unfiltered humanity of those they had once dismissed burned away the layers of prejudice, revealing the true value of empathy, humility, and the profound, undeniable connection that binds us all. Chad and Richard were no longer merely serving a sentence. They were slowly, tentatively, beginning to serve humanity. And the lessons they were learning here amidst the laughter and tears of the underprivileged were far more valuable than any deal closed on a polished showroom floor. But would this transformation last? And what would Elias Vance make of their change? The answer lay just around the corner. The 2 weeks at the Lantern House Foundation were drawing to a close. What had begun as a humiliating sentence for Chad Sterling and Richard Mason had slowly, almost imperceptibly transformed into something far more profound. The initial resistance had given way to a tentative acceptance, and then, for Chad especially, to a genuine engagement. Chad, the man who once couldn't bear to touch anything less than pristine, now moved through the Lantern House with a newfound ease. His expensive clothes were often smudged with dust or paint, but he no longer seemed to care. He no longer complained about the smell of the kitchen or the noise of the children. Instead, he sought out tasks, offering help without being asked. He'd spend extra time helping the formerly incarcerated residents craft resumes, his sales experience surprisingly useful in highlighting their transferable skills. He'd sit with struggling single parents, patiently explaining complex forms or simply offering an empathetic ear. His bond with Miles, the bright-eyed 9-year-old, had deepened significantly. Chad would often be found in the corner of the study area, not just supervising but genuinely helping Miles with his homework or listening intently to his latest fantastical stories. Miles, in turn, had brought out a side of Chad that no luxury car sale ever could. A genuine, uncomplicated kindness. One afternoon, Chad was teaching Miles how to play checkers, a simple game that brought immense joy to the boy. Watching him, Richard Mason, who had always viewed Chad as nothing more than an arrogant opportunist, felt a quiet respect blossom. Richard himself, though perhaps not as dramatically transformed as Chad, had also undergone a significant shift. He was still the meticulous businessman, but his interactions were no longer purely transactional. He saw the humanity in the faces he served. He leveraged his network, quietly contacting a few business associates to explore job opportunities for some of the Lantern House's adults. He even spent an entire morning helping Ms. Evie Price organize their chaotic supply room, applying his business acumen to a problem far removed from profit margins. The satisfaction he felt was different, deeper than any bottom line. On the final morning, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere occurred. Chad, who had been dreading this moment, found himself feeling a strange pang of reluctance. He looked around at the bustling center, at the children he had grown to care for, at the faces of people whose stories had humbled him. He wasn't the same man who had walked in here 2 weeks ago. He actually missed this place. Later that afternoon, a sleek, understated, black SUV pulled up to the Lantern House. Out stepped Elias Vance. He wasn't there for a grand inspection or to gloat. He simply watched from a distance as Chad helped Miles fix a broken toy truck, his face etched with genuine concentration and care. He saw Richard patiently explaining a form to a young mother, his usual stiff posture softened. A faint, approving smile touched Elias's lips. He then approached Chad and Richard. "Gentlemen," Elias said, his voice calm, "your 2 weeks are officially concluded." Chad looked up, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. "Mr. Vance," he began, his voice surprisingly humble, I know a simple apology won't erase what I did to your daughter, but I want to deliver it properly. I've learned so much here. I see how wrong I was, how blinded I was by superficiality." Elias nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Actions speak louder than words, Mr. Sterling, and I believe you've begun to act." Chad then made an unexpected request. "Mr. Vance, if it's not too much to ask, I'd like to apologize to Alani in person. Not in a boardroom, not in a staged press conference. Just me, humbling myself and her if she'll allow it. A few days later, Alani sat in her father's study, a slight apprehension in her eyes. The doorbell rang, and Elias himself answered. Chad Sterling stood on their doorstep, no longer in his sharp suit, but in smart casual attire, looking significantly humbler, almost vulnerable. Elias gestured him in. Chad entered, his gaze immediately finding Alani's. He didn't offer a practiced speech. He spoke from the heart, his voice raw with sincerity. "Alani," he began, his voice a little shaky, "I want to apologize, from the depths of my being, for my inexcusable behavior at the Prestige. My arrogance, my prejudice, my dismissal of you based on your appearance and skin color. It was a profound mistake. I was blind, judgmental, and utterly wrong. Spending time at the Lantern House meeting people like Miles has opened my eyes. I saw how much dignity and strength exist in people I would have previously dismissed. I regret my actions more than words can say. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." He didn't demand forgiveness. He simply offered his remorse. Alani looked at him, truly looked at him. She saw the genuine shame in his eyes, the humility that had replaced the arrogance. She saw a man who had been forced to see the world differently and who, to his credit, had allowed himself to be changed. She didn't offer immediate forgiveness, but her voice was softer. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Your words and your actions at the Lantern House mean a great deal. I appreciate your sincerity. I hope this lesson stays with you." Elias Vance, observing the exchange, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. His plan had worked, but the biggest twists were yet to come. Later, Elias met with Chad and Richard in his office. He laid out his final terms, which held a profound and unexpected twist. "Mr. Mason," Elias began, addressing the dealership owner, "your company has endured a challenging 2 weeks, but I have seen a willingness to change, and I've heard positive reports from Mazevi Price about both your efforts. Vance Innovations is in constant need of high-end corporate vehicles, and we value partners who align with our values. Therefore, I am prepared to offer the Prestige Motor Group a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract for all of our corporate vehicle needs, on one condition." Winter silenced Bella. Richard Mason's eyes widened, then filled with disbelief. A contract with Vance Innovations? This was a lifeline, a monumental opportunity. "Condition, Mr. Vance? Anything." "The condition," Elias stated firmly, "is that you commit to a sustained, measurable DEI program. You will hire more diverse staff, implement ongoing cultural sensitivity training, and actively promote inclusivity within your entire organization. This isn't a temporary fix. It's a fundamental shift in your business model. This contract is a reward for genuine, lasting change." Richard, stunned but elated, agreed without hesitation. Then Elias turned to Chad. Chad braced himself for a dismissal, or perhaps a lecture. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said, his voice even, "your 2 weeks are over. You are no longer obligated to the Lantern House, nor to the Prestige. However, I have seen a remarkable transformation in you. Your analytical mind, your organizational skills combined with this newfound empathy, they are valuable assets. So, I am not offering you your old job back at the Prestige." Chad's heart sank. He knew it. This was the final blow. Instead, Elias continued, a subtle smile touching his lips. "I am offering you a position as Senior Project Manager for the Vance Innovations philanthropic arm. Your primary focus will be on community outreach, developing programs that support initiatives like the Lantern House, and fostering partnerships to uplift underserved communities. It's a role that requires compassion, strategic thinking, and the ability to connect with people on a human level, something you've shown a surprising aptitude for these past 2 weeks. Chad Sterling was utterly speechless. A position at Vance Innovations, not in sales, not in luxury, but in philanthropy. It was the last thing he ever expected. He thought of Miles, of Evie, of the genuine smiles and heartfelt gratitude he'd witnessed. He thought of the emptiness his pursuit of material wealth had left him with. A profound sense of purpose, of true meaning, washed over him. He looked at Elias, then at his own hands, no longer soft but calloused from honest work. "Mr. Vance," he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion, I accept, with profound gratitude." I've seen a different kind of prestige these past 2 weeks, a much more valuable one, face of God. This was the ultimate plot twist. Elias Vance hadn't sought revenge, he had orchestrated redemption. He hadn't just punished, he had transformed. He had shown that true power wasn't just about what you could take, but what you could give, what you could build, and how you could change hearts and minds. The sting of prejudice had been met not with more anger, but with an unexpected, life-altering lesson in compassion. And the journey for both Chad and Richard, now on very different paths, had just truly begun. 6 months later, the vibrant hum of Miami continued, but for many the rhythm had subtly shifted. The ripples from Elias Vance's quiet ultimatum had spread far beyond the polished floors of the Prestige Motor Group, echoing with the lasting impact of empathy and the profound power of second chances. Chad Sterling, once a fixture of arrogance on the luxury car circuit, was now a transformed man. You wouldn't find him in a high-end showroom, but rather in the bustling heart of Miami's underserved communities. His attire still smart, but now more practical. He was, as promised, a senior project manager at the Vance Innovations philanthropic arm. His days were now filled with developing initiatives to uplift at-risk youth, securing funding for educational programs, and most notably, spending a significant portion of his time at the Lantern House Foundation. Chad's transformation was startling, almost unbelievable to those who had known his past self. He no longer felt a compulsive need to check his watch or to prove his worth through material possessions. He taught a weekly life skills class to the teenagers at the Lantern House, his sales acumen repurposed to teach them about budgeting, resume writing, and confident communication. Skills he now understood were far more valuable than the price tag on a car. His relationship with Miles, the little boy who had unknowingly sparked his change, had blossomed into a genuine mentorship. You'd often find Chad on his knees in the study area, helping Miles with his math, or laughing as the boy recounted an imaginary adventure. The joy on Chad's face was real, unfeigned, a purity he hadn't known was possible. The prestige I chased was hollow, he confided to Ms. Evie Price one evening, his voice soft with sincerity. The real prestige, I've found, is in helping someone find their own path, their own dignity. At the Prestige Motor Group, Richard Mason had not forgotten the terms of the Vance Innovations contract. The dealership had visibly changed. Gone were the snobbish attitudes and the hushed, judgmental whispers. The staff was noticeably more diverse, reflecting the true tapestry of Miami. New marketing campaigns emphasized inclusivity, focusing on the joy of driving rather than the exclusivity of ownership. Richard himself had fundamentally altered his approach. He was still a sharp businessman, but his interactions with customers, regardless of their appearance, were now marked by genuine respect and a newfound warmth. He was often seen personally greeting diverse clients, offering them the same meticulous attention he once reserved only for the overtly wealthy. The partnership with Vance Innovations was thriving, proving that ethical business practices could also be incredibly profitable. And Maya Sharma, the quiet sales associate who had dared to speak truth to power, her courage had not gone unnoticed. Within a few months, she was promoted to a leadership role within the newly established DEI department at the Prestige. She became a symbol of the positive internal change, a beacon of integrity that the dealership now proudly championed. One quiet evening, Alani Davis sat with her father, Elias Vance, on the porch of their Florida Keys home, watching the last vestiges of sunset paint the sky. The Rolls-Royce Spectre, a testament to her thoughtful gift, gleamed softly in the garage. "It's funny, Dad," Alani mused, her voice thoughtful. "That day at the Prestige, it hurt. It really did, but it also taught me something invaluable. It solidified everything you ever taught me about true worth." Elias smiled, placing a comforting hand on hers. "And it taught others too, Pupkin. That's the real victory." He looked out at the horizon, his gaze distant but profound. "You see, my dear listeners," Elias Vance's voice now taking on the tone of the narrator, "the world often tries to define us by what we wear, what we drive, or the color of our skin. We are constantly barraged with images of success that are purely superficial. But, as Alani's story, and indeed Chad's transformation, so powerfully illustrates, true value isn't about the label on your car, the size of your bank account, or the zip code you live in. It's about the content of your character, the empathy you extend, and the respect you give to every single human being without exception." He paused, the gentle waves of the ocean providing a natural rhythm to his words. Prejudice is a silent thief. It robs the victim of their dignity, yes, but it also robs the perpetrator of understanding, of connection, of the richness that comes from seeing the world through eyes unclouded by bias. It diminishes us all. But here's the beautiful truth. Every single one of us has the opportunity to make amends, to learn, to grow, to choose compassion over contempt, to choose understanding over ignorance. What matters most is not that we sometimes make mistakes, but that we learn from them, genuinely, deeply, and allow them to guide us towards a more humane path. So I leave you with this question, my friends. What biases might you be unknowingly holding on to? What judgments do you make, perhaps without even realizing it? How can you be a force for positive change in your own sphere, however small? How can you look beyond the surface and see the unseen, fortune, in every person you meet? If Alani's quiet strength, Elias's profound wisdom, and Chad's transformative journey have resonated with you, if this story has touched your heart or sparked a new thought, please consider giving this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message, someone who feels unseen, or someone who needs a reminder of the power of empathy. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next deeply touching, profoundly insightful stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the next stories.